Market recap for Tuesday, the 3rd of February 2026. I'm not gonna lie, this market is tough, right? It's not an easy read. It's just not simple, right? It's not simple to read it, but there is stuff to be taken, right? So let's just go on the daily first, right? And just look at the overall structure, right? And what my bias was since basically last week, as I explained how I see this area, right? Just accumulation. And then we had our manipulation all the way up here to fill this gap, hit this order block. FOMC came, and then we start displacing lower, right? And my main targets are at least these lows, um, somewhere in this volume imbalance, and if we're gonna reach lower beyond that, right? This might be the accumulation for the start of the year, then manipulate, and then we're gonna start distributing lower, taking bunch of lows. Even we could go visit all the way up down here, but this just depends on how the market moves and how we're gonna treat this consolidation area. As you can see, we're still in the consolidation area, so I'm looking for the market for the next few days if we're gonna actually start displacing and getting out of the range. And that's why I say this market is tough, right? For daily PD arrays, especially for discount, since we went all the way to this low and we haven't taken it out, right? A retracement is expected, especially how much of range that we moved in the last 2 days, right? Thursday and Friday. The only PD array that I can see, right? The only PD array for discount is this inversion right here, which when you go on set, it's a whole suspension block, right? The bigger the PD array, you just take the bigger one, right? So I have that marked out on this time frame for the daily. And mainly, like ICT teaches, midpoint, if we don't close above that, we're still bearish. And overall, I'm bearish, and I prefer bearish price action until something makes sense to be bullish, right? So I'm bearish, but I'm not really against the idea of us taking the highs again. And that would all depend on, like I said, how we close. When I said in yesterday's video, wait, I didn't even make the recap. I didn't upload one for yesterday. But regardless, my thought is, if we close above the midpoint, or if we really close above this whole suspension block, like let's say upper quadrant or something like that, right? If we like close up here or something like that. So if this day was bullish, then I'm looking at the highs again. If this day was bearish, then I'm still looking at the lows, right? That's overall market structure, market bias, whatever, on the really high time frame, right? So overall, I'm bearish still, and the market confirmed it today. Again, like I said, tough, right? 4 hour, we've returned to the same CB, right? That displaced us lower, right here, and we were near the midpoint. So let me go on this chart, right? Because this will just have mess, right? Let me just delete everything with it, and let's just get in the midpoint of that CB, right? So 4 hour, and let's just remove the midpoint. As you can see, we couldn't lay any bodies on the 4 hour above the midpoint. Again, bearish. On ES, we went all the way above, right? But this is what ES does, right? This is literally what ES does. I don't care about trading the ES, but this is what ES does normally, right? It doesn't really matter. But my main point is that we have taken the highs. So just imagine a big SMT, right? So let's zoom in, and we're gonna have to get really, really technical, because for this day it was just tough, right? So my expectation, really, especially on like the 15-minute, when watching the market structure before what was it, before 9:30, is we're very, very likely to open and just dump, right? Where could we dump to, right? Regardless if we're bullish or bearish, we're gonna dump, right? Why? Because Monday opened up, right? It went all the way down. Where did it go down to? Can't remember what I had it marked, right? It went all the way down and then just started shooting higher without any retracement, without any discount offered in the run up, right? From this whole run up, if you're just trying to mark discount, you would see price never reach discount. Every time it's making higher highs, higher highs, higher highs, right? And once we opened in terms of liquidity, we had Asia low right here, we had London low. Well, technically that's not London low. London low that was taken, right, in terms of my session timing. But we had a 7 a.m. low, right? And we come back to OTE. So in terms of 9:30, especially that we manipulated above midnight, and I'll go on the lower time frame to show it. I'm expecting if we don't take this high, we're gonna dump at 9:30 to clear out this low, this low, this low, and preferably hitting the midpoint and rebalancing Monday's range, which is the midpoint is somewhere down here, right? It's around here, and that would also be close to the 9:30 low yesterday, right? We had kind of a devil's mark and we just shot up, right? So that low is one liquidity next to the low of the new weekly opening gap. So all of these are targets, and this is just a magnet for price, right? So as long as we don't take London high, we are bearish, right? Because this area is the midpoint of that suspension block on the daily, okay? All right, so now let's get technical, right? I know there's a bunch of stuff, but it makes sense. So just before that, on the 15-minute, one more thing to confirm my bearish bias. And I did actually take a demo trade on pre-market. I don't really enter pre-market on my actual account. So once we inverse this gap, right, which went to OTE, taking highs, SMT, right? I took the short here, right? Once we closed, we hit it. We were not closing above the midpoint, even on the 1 minute. I took that short as a demo, right? And closed out down here. Anyway, actual trade for me. Let's go down to the 1 minute. And let's show the annotations again. First thing, I need to explain everything, right? As I said, the liquidity that we had and all the way down here, and this green line is the midpoint. This is the high of the new weekly opening gap of last week, and this is the low of the new weekly opening gap of last week as well. This is the low of our current new weekly opening gap. Okay, so all of this acts as a magnet for price, all of this, right? So we expect price to at least hit here before even like expecting bullish price action, right? Minimum, basically. So if we're looking at market structure at London and expecting London to be high today, let's just zoom in. And this is the suspension block, and all these are just like the quadrants, really, right? And they sum up to basically the 16th of the quadrants, right? It's a whatever, really, right? So let me just explain. ICT in his previous live streams explained that the best fair value gaps are the ones that lay on top of a quadrant, or let's just say the 8th, the 16th, the whatever, right? And as you can see, I have these fair value gaps marked, right? Since London. Once London has reached the midpoint, right here, next to midnight open, right? These two blue ones, one of them is the midnight open, one of them is the midpoint. And as you can see, we're consolidating around this area. This gap, which breaks market structure and lays on top of a quadrant, watch it, right? There's another one, comes back into it, there, and then we keep heading lower from them. There's another one right here, right? I'm marking literally the only ones. If you're watching the runs, this one doesn't lay on top of a quadrant. This one doesn't lay on top of a quadrant, right? Trust me, each one is marked properly. And as you can see, this is the last one that we come to at the 7 a.m. session. Why is this one marked? Because this one is two gaps, right? This one is the first presented fair value gap after 7, right? And second is laid over a quadrant, right? That's why this one is marked specifically, not this one, right? So when we carry this over price, we can see that we're respecting it here at, where's ES? Here with ES, we make an SMT, right? At the highs, right there, taking that high. It's actually exactly the same high, but in terms of ES making the same high, I count that as SMT as well, right? And on NQ, don't forget, all the way up, we do not take that high, right? So that's my SMT as confirmation that we are still bearish. Again, running this whole thing through market structure, going all the way down, I'm watching this first presented fair value gap and how we're going to treat it at 9:30. Okay, so we have this SIBI that lays on top of a quadrant. We keep wicking into it, but once we close below, watch the 9:30 opening. Boom, below midpoint, right? We do have the wick, but look at what we're closing, where we're closing, and then boom, we go all the way down here. That to me, on top of all of what I said earlier, is enough as a confirmation to me to be short and supporting my idea for a 9:30 short. That's why I hop on the 15-second chart and just look for an entry. This type of structure where it wicks basically and then lays on top of this whole run basically instantly. To me, this is a breakaway gap, and this is a breakaway gap, especially when it closes next to the wick, right? And then we can see then we have a next fair value gap that lays on top of a quadrant right there. Boom, I take the short and stop loss above this. Even though I'm counting this as a breakaway gap, I wouldn't like price to go into it, but you know, in this volatile market, you cannot have tight stop losses, and I just let it run, right? And yeah, that's the morning session. As you can see on the 1 minute, it ran to all the targets, right? Went dooming, made an order block, right? Here's the liquidity that I'm looking for, and then starts shooting lower for the new weekly opening gap. This one, the opening for the current one is around here, and this is where it could have stopped, right? We could have had launch macro to go above for these buy side, which is the one after 10, right? Visiting this SIBI, but look at price, it gets held down here and then shoots lower. The fact that it shoots lower here rather than shooting higher after this sweep, right? Right there, it just says don't do anything, wait for final hour macro, right? If you miss this, right, and some days I do miss the short at 9:30, I'm looking at the lunch for this long. Lunch was not offered today, so I'm looking at final hour macro. Final hour macro goes all the way, and what price really goes to is that volume imbalance that I was talking about in, where was it? If we just go to normal, if you just go to the volume imbalance and just have it marked on the daily, as you can see, that was the low of the day, right? But look at the time that I hit it. It's 2:07, so that's not the time for me to trade, right? We go all the way up, we go down, then we go up. Final hour macro, preferably for me, is 3:15, right? This is 3:15. The last swing, technically market structure shift right here, mini one basically. and you would just enter on the inverse, right? That volume imbalance, you would enter on the inverse, boom, right? Stop loss right here. It does over kind of shoot, but again, bodies are still respecting it, so it doesn't matter. And you have first TP, second TP, and normally I would just put the TP somewhere in like this gap or something, and that's all. That's all you want. Something like this, let's say, and that would be around. Let's just say 125 points. I didn't take this because I took the short, but yeah, that's the market recap. I wouldn't say it's easy. Like genuinely, this is not easy, right? To get in sync with. Um, Stop losses. Like let's say you're trying to go for like launch macro, just it's just not there. It's just a tough market, right? And overall, what you need to know from this is if we have a manipulation, especially above like something like midnight open or something like that, and we're still respecting stuff on the high time frame, regardless of how high we went up on one day, we could do the same thing the next day and just overshoot and then just take everything right back, right? This market is highly, highly manipulated, but again, it's still delivering to what it should deliver to. Overall, I'm still bearish. I'm looking for tomorrow to get up into this area, maybe visit the top of our previous new weekly opening gap, and then start heading lower again. But I can't tell from just closing right now, so I'm just gonna have to tell from like again 9:30 opening tomorrow and just see what the bias is still saying. However, I'm overall still bearish. I'm still looking for lower targets, and for them targets, I'm gonna actually have to check something on the weekly or the monthly, that much, right? And obviously, is them two lows, right? And then after that, if we're gonna displace, especially on the weekly, if we're gonna displace on the weekly, then I might even be looking for this low, right? Just the whole, maybe this is as a market maker sell model, we could go lower and then eventually go higher later in few months or weeks, right? Anyway, this is the market structure, tough market. But yeah, that's the recap. Peace out.